Hello everyone, I welcome all of you to my lectures on biochemistry for pharmacy students. So in this session we will discuss in detail regarding the second part of electron transport chain, that is oxidative phosphorylation. Okay, so in the last class what did we learn? The electron transport chain and how it is actually happening is what we have seen in the last class. So overall, in case of electron transport chain we have four complexes: complex 1, complex 2, complex 3 and complex 4. The ultimate objective is to oxidize either NADH or FADH2 to corresponding oxidized cofactors. Okay, and by making use of the electrons that are generated, that are captured while oxidizing, and by using a network of cofactors, they transfer electrons from place to place. That is, the electrons that are captured from NADH or FADH2 by coenzyme Q are transferred across the complexes via cytochromes, cytochrome B, cytochrome C1, cytochrome C and cytochrome A2, A3, and ultimately these electrons are utilized for burning oxygen, reducing oxygen to water. So in this process it is crossing three complexes, among which the first complex and third complex, these two are proton pumps, which pump 4 protons per 2 electrons that are moving across the pump. And at the end, complex number 4 is also a proton pump, but it can transfer only 2 protons across the inner membrane into the intermembrane space. So overall, per mole of NADH, a total of 10 protons, 10 moles of protons. Okay, for every 1 molecule of NADH, 10 protons are pumped across this membrane, so that we are generating proton gradient. Okay, proton gradient. So this proton gradient you can also see in the form of proton motive force, the force that can be utilized for any physical actions. Okay, so now let's see how actually the electron transfer from complex to complex is possible, and let's have a brief idea on various cofactors or coenzymes that participates in electron transport chain, and then let's see the basics of chemi-osmotic theory and then oxidative phosphorylation. Okay, so let's move ahead. So as we have seen in the last lecture, it is the difference in reduction potentials which actually drives the electrons to move in a direction. So here if you see the critical areas where the electrons are transferred from NAD plus, because NAD to NAD plus, this oxidation, so here the reduction potential is minus 0.315 electron volts, and for ubiquinone it is 0.3 electron volts, minus 0.3 electron volts, and then for cytochrome C it is plus 0.235 electron volts, and for oxygen it is plus 815 electron volts. So that's the reason why you can see in the electron transport chain, I am showing you only the important molecules over here. If you see the entire list, you will find there is a gradual increase in the reduction potential. So that's the reason why electrons that are originated in the first step in the complex 1 flow in a direction and ultimately end up in reducing oxygen. So NADH right now is the strongest donor of proton, and oxygen is the strongest acceptor of protons. Okay, the reduction potential energy of NADH is released in a stepwise manner via the electron transport chain. So here you can see the delta G value between complex to complex. Here the delta G value is minus 69.5 kilojoules per mole. Here it is 36.7, and from complex 3 to complex 4 the energy is minus 112 kilojoules per mole. The flow of electrons results in energy that is released in increments through the electron transport chain. Energy is used to, this energy that we are building in the form of proton motive force. Okay, so energy is used to pump protons across the inner mitochondrial membrane and set up the pH gradient. So this is what I am calling as proton motive force. It is the release of energy in the gradient back through the membrane, through the integral membrane protein ATP synthase that drives ATP synthesis. Okay friends, this is what we have seen in the last class, where the proton motive force that is generated across the pH gradient that is generated across the membrane actually makes the protons to rush through certain specialized proteins. We call them as ATP synthase enzymes. So they will make use of the energy that is generated in that process to be converted into, to be utilized for ATP synthesis. So cofactors that are involved in electron transport chain, let's have a brief idea on them. Compounds containing electron carrying groups or oxidation reduction groups are present in the electron transport chain. So here majorly two types of units are there. One is flavins, the second one is metal containing groups. Flavin means flavin mononucleotides, FMNs, and metal containing groups like heme containing proteins are what we call them as cytochrome enzymes. So these are what we call them as cytochrome C, A, A3, B, etc. Okay? And the next type of metal containing groups are iron sulfide complexes. So one of the form is this one, and the second form is this one. So these are the two types of iron sulfide complexes that are observed in electron transport chain. So here let's say if cytochromes are there, so they are rigid structures. So when iron is over here, iron is over here, iron is over here, iron is over here, and iron is over here, so these are all connected via sulfur. So because of the spatial proximity, when an electron is over here, it will jump from here to here, and it will jump from here to here, it will jump from here to here, it will jump from here to here. This is the way how flow of electrons is ensured. Okay. The next one is mobile electron carriers like ubiquinone and cytochrome C that is present on the outside of the inner membrane also can be considered as a mobile electron carrier. So ubiquinone becomes ubiquinol, so thereby it can capture proton as well as an electron, whereas in case of cytochrome C we have iron. Iron can flip from +2 to +3, so it is considered as single electron carriers. Shuttles electrons from complex 3 to complex 4. Okay, so this is it. Coupling electron transport chain with phosphorylation, the chemi-osmotic hypothesis. Actually, Professor Peter Michel has provided us this chemi-osmotic hypothesis. So what he is saying is like proton concentration gradient or proton motive force serves as the energy reservoir for driving ATP formation. Okay, so it is his proposal, he has proved it, for which he was awarded Nobel Prize. So this is critical in understanding the way how our energy sources are generated. In complex 5 you have a typical protein, multi-protein conglomerate. It's a huge protein with multiple subunits. Okay, so largely you have two units, that is F0. F0 is the transmembrane protein, and you also have F1, the knob-like structure over here, that is F1. So these are the two major subunits that we have. Okay, so where F0 holds the entire protein structure in place, and it also has the capability to act as a proton pump. It pumps or allows protons to move across the membrane from intermembrane space to matrix side. like this. And this proton motive force, the energy gradient that is derived out of the proton flow, is utilized by the F1 protein we have over here to convert ADP to ATP. Okay, this is in simple how ATP production is happening inside our cells, inside the mitochondria. This is the original 3D model of the protein. So here we have the transmembrane region, we call it as F0. The channels that we have here, we call them as C protein channels, which allow the protons to move across the membrane. And here we have different subunits, and here is the ATP synthase part. Okay, so this is another graphical 3D representation of the protein structure, where let me give you the important units. These are C proteins, this is B unit, this is A unit, and here we have alpha and beta subunits. This is gamma, and this is the delta subunit. Alpha, beta, gamma and delta. So gamma unit looks like a shaft, okay, shaft which holds on to the alpha, beta and delta subunits. So among these, the beta subunit contains the catalytic site. The beta protein, whatever we have here, beta subunit over here, contain the catalytic site where ADP is converted to ATP. So friends, this is what actually is the mechanism via which ATP synthase works. So friends, as I told you, the catalytic part of the ATP synthase enzyme contains alpha and beta protein subunits, where beta unit is the catalytic unit. So here ATP synthesis usually happens by making use of the energy obtained via proton gradient that has been generated in the electron transport chain. So in case of the B subunit, you will have enormous changes in conformations, which helps in capturing ATP and bringing ATP and inorganic, capturing ADP, bringing ADP and inorganic phosphate together and clubbing them together to obtain ATP, and then ATP will be released into the solution. Okay, so to represent that in a simple manner, I am giving here three structures, where the beta subunit, if you see the single unit, it contains the receptor pocket in three forms. One is open form, loosely bound form and tightly bound form. In these three, the conformational changes that you can observe clearly. So in the open form, it accepts ADP and inorganic phosphate from the matrix region, and then it will hold on to it properly and then bring them together, so that this is loosely bound state, and ultimately it will squeeze them together almost like that, and then ATP is synthesized, and ultimately ATP will be released into the matrix side. Okay friends, this is the way how the conformational changes that are happening in the beta subunit results in biosynthesis of ATP. And when you see, because in case of the F0 subunit, you have 3 alpha units and 3 beta units will be there in an alternating arrangement. And if you take that into consideration, so the 3 pockets are there. Okay, so in between, let's presume that we have alpha units here, here and here. These are the 3 beta units, and then in this you can clearly see that one of the unit shall always be in open condition, one of the unit shall always be in the loosely bound condition, and the third one will be in the tightly bound condition. Okay, so as you keep on letting the protons to flow through the ATP synthase enzyme, what happens is one of the pocket where it is loosely bound open state is there, that accepts the ADP to inorganic phosphate, and in the next protein where it is in the loosely bound state, ADP and inorganic phosphate will be there. And the third protein, whatever we have over here, ATP will be there. And as the protons are moving in, then immediately what will happen? The first unit became loosely bound state. The second unit has squeezed the ADP and inorganic phosphate to obtain ATP. And from the third protein, ATP that has been synthesized already is released, so that the receptor pocket now it has gone back to open state. Okay, conformational changes that are happening over here. As the protons are still moving through the ATP synthetase, the ADP and inorganic phosphate is now became ATP, and from here the ATP has been removed, and now here, because it is open state earlier, now it has accepted ADP and inorganic phosphate, so that it is now in the loosely bound state. So friends, this is the way how it is a cyclical event. As the protons are moving through the ATP synthetase enzyme in a cyclical manner, these three protein subunits, beta units that we have, the catalytic site, they will change their conformation in a synchronous manner, so that ADP is recognized, ADP and inorganic phosphate is recognized, and ATP is synthesized and ATP is released. So this sequence happens. Okay, so friends, I hope you got the point here. So let's move ahead. Regarding the regulation of ATP synthesis, as you all knew, please remember one point: as and when our system is high in energy, means ATP concentration is very high in our system, obviously it reflects in blocking energy producing pathways. It can be glycolysis or citric acid cycle or electron transport chain. Okay, so because higher concentrations of ATP in the blocks citric acid cycle, thereby indirectly it blocks the electron transport chain. Okay, so electrons, especially in electron transport chain, how it happens, electrons do not flow unless ADP is present for phosphorylation. So one of the key regulator of electron transport chain is adenosine diphosphate. Increased ADP levels cause an increase in catabolic reactions, okay, that is glycogen phosphorylase, phosphofructokinase and citrate synthetase. So these are the three enzymes which are regulated in the presence of ADP. In the presence of ADP means higher levels of ADP indicates lack of energy. Okay, ATP levels has gone down. So that's the reason why these three are going to be activated. So thereby corresponding cycles are going to be catalyzed. So that reflects in production of NADH and FADH2. So active transport of ATP, ADP and inorganic phosphate across the inner mitochondrial membrane is another parameter which we need to understand. So ATP that is synthesized in the mitochondrial matrix has to be shifted to the cytosol, okay, because energy requirement is there in the cytosol. ATP must now be transported to the cytosol, and ADP and inorganic phosphate must enter the matrix. Okay, so that is the way how. Now this ADP ATP carrier exchanges mitochondrial ATP for cytosolic ADP. So this exchange causes a net loss of -1 because ATP contains -4 charges. So for ADP you have -3. Okay, so there will be a net loss of -1 in the matrix because it draws some energy from the proton gradient. Okay, so in that way. So adenine nucleotide translocase, the enzyme that is a unidirectional exchange of ATP for ADP is done by this translocase. It is an antipode, means one ATP goes out and one ADP enters into the matrix. So that is the way how. Symport of inorganic phosphate and proton is electron neutral. Okay, inorganic phosphate is taken into the matrix via symport mechanism with the help of proton gradient. Okay, so friends, this is the way how ATP ADP and inorganic phosphate move across the mitochondrial membranes. Okay. So here is the example of how it is happening. So ATP that is there in the matrix has to move into the cytosol, whereas ADP and inorganic phosphates have to enter into the mitochondrial matrix. Inorganic phosphate enter into the mitochondrial matrix with the help of the proton gradient, and the ATP and ADP transporters are actually coupled with each other, so that it is considered as an anti-port mechanism. Okay. So in the last slide we have seen how actually ATP that is synthesized in the matrix that moves into the cytosol. Okay. So now I am introducing you to a new term, that is P:O ratio. Okay. So what it is actually, let's see. P:O ratio is molecules of ADP phosphorylated per number of atoms of oxygen reduced. Okay, so this is the calculation which we need to do. So here another simple way how we can understand this concept is like in the ATP synthesis, the ATP synthetase enzyme as we have seen, okay, it is present in the, this is outer membrane, inner membrane, and this is inner membrane space, this is matrix. Okay, so here is our ATP synthetase enzyme. So here for 1 mole of ATP to be synthesized, okay, from ADP, ATP synthetase enzyme needs 3 protons to move across the membrane. Okay, so this is the inner membrane, this is the outer membrane. So for every 3 protons we can get 1 adenosine triphosphate. So ATP is in the matrix right now. So in the last slide we have also seen that for obtaining inorganic phosphate, okay, inorganic phosphate, we do need 1 proton, okay, to drive it into the matrix. So this is like a symport mechanism where it consumes 1 more proton. So that's the reason why a total of 4 protons are needed for synthesis of 1 ATP molecule. Then the number of protons translocated per 2 electrons, because at complex 1, 3 and 4, okay, so at every point you have seen that 2 electrons were shifted from complex to complex. For every 2 electrons, how many protons were pumped into the intermembrane space? In complex 1, 4 protons, complex 3, 4 protons, and complex 4, 2 protons. Since here 4 protons are required for each ATP to be synthesized, for NADH how many protons we are getting? 10 protons we are getting per 1 oxygen, okay, because oxygen takes in 2 electrons to get converted to water molecule. So for every 1 oxygen that is consumed, that is reduced to water molecule, which takes 2 electrons and 2 protons. So for that 10 protons are translocated, and for every 10 protons how many ATPs can be synthesized? 10 by 4, that is 2.5 ATPs per oxygen. Okay, so this is the P/O ratio. P/O ratio for NADH is 2.5. And for FADH2, so we get, because we are surpassing this complex 1, it goes to complex 3 and 4, because complex 2 does not have any proton pumping capability. So that's the reason why the P/O ratio will become 1.5 here. Okay, so friends, this is the way how P/O ratio can be calculated. And now another very important concept is electron transport chain blockers and uncouplers. So friends, this will continue this discussion in the next class, and I hope you got the point of how actually electron transport chain is coupled to oxidative phosphorylation, the proton gradient that was generated in the electron transport chain, and how this proton motive force is utilized by the ATP synthetase enzyme system to obtain ATP from ADP is what we have seen today. And we also have seen the P by O ratio. P is to O ratio means for every one ATP how many oxygens are consumed. So that is also what we have seen. And for NADPH a total of 2.5 ATPs can be generated, whereas for one FADH2 on an average 1.5 ATPs can be generated. Okay, we'll conclude the session here and we'll meet again in the next class. I request you to please share this video with your friends, and if you have any doubts please post it in the comment box so that I'll respond. Subscribe to my YouTube channel so that you will get a notification as and when I release a new video. I thank you all for your time and see you with another exciting lecture soon. Thank you.